as a result of what happened, faced absolute national ridicule, and on a scale that, without exaggerating, few people have ever experienced. I mean, I couldn't go down any street in Britain without being laughed at by most of the people. Going into a bar, forget it, was uproar. A comedian only had to say my name on the telly, no joke necessary, audience were in hysterics. And you have to experience that to understand what it's like.
I hope this one doesn't have loud music. That David Icke talks rubbish.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist, I'm a former intelligence officer for MI5 who has been aware and involved in blowing the whistle on false flag attacks. So what I'm saying is it's historic reality. The reason it's not talked about in history books, of course, it's the old cliche that the victors write history. So the victors tend to be the people in government. They can ensure that their version is the one that is put out there, and that's what we're told to believe. Then, of course, you get the whole legal infrastructure protecting their position, so that with things like the Official Secrets Act, with the libel laws, with the anti-terrorism laws, people are not allowed to talk about this sort of information. So, and then, of course, we get the media, which will be banned from reporting it under some of this legislation, but also a media that will self-censor and be prey to government spin, and will be controlled by the same sort of people within government. So there are all sorts of reasons why this information doesn't get out there, and I think mainly it's government control and government spin.
Look out the frickin' window. Will you look out the window? Will you look at my grandkids? Will you look at yours? Hey? What are you doing? I think it's pathetic, and that's why I work alone.
Much time has passed since. However, David still remains outside of the mainstream media due to his slightly controversial views, such as the royal family acting as entities for a reptilian race bent on using the population of Earth as their slaves. But what I wanted to find out was how David discovered the truth.
Taken there and shown by this synchronicity. And it's taken me, not just in those upper levels of the rabbit hole, politics and stuff like that, it's taken me into ancient history, because this story goes back a long, long way. In the 3 weeks I was in Peru, synchronicity is not the word. Extraordinary things were happening every day in terms of the way things just came together, coincidences, etc. I heard this voice go through my mind, very strong, thoughtful. First line was, they'll be talking about this 100 years from now. Talking about what? And then that was followed by, it will be over when you feel the rain. So I'm thinking, what bloody rain? There's not a cloud in the sky, my nose is bright red with the sun. There's just a piercing sun, nothing else, and blue sky. That experience, whatever it was, that energetic experience, opened my bubble. And I was accessing a much greater area of consciousness, awareness, than I had been before.
It has been suggested that through David's experience in Peru, he could have been going through a psychological breakdown familiar to that of schizophrenia. I asked whether medication from his youth could have perhaps affected him as a developing young man.
Well, I can be absolutely 100% on that by saying no, for a very simple reason. I didn't take any medication, all right?
One reason people dismiss the possibility that the September 11th attack was a government operation is that they cannot believe everybody in the U.S. government would remain silent about such an incredible crime. A woman named Kay Griggs, the second wife of Marine Corps Colonel George Griggs, can help us understand why everybody is silent. Her information about the U.S. government comes from her husband, her personal observations, her husband's diary, and people she met. Even if some of her information is incorrect, the top military and political leaders of America are routinely blackmailed, bribed, threatened, and manipulated. She mentions many government officials by name, so if her accusations are false, she is making a lot of slanderous remarks about a lot of people. For example,
I found my husband's diary, which I have here, which they have been not anxious to have get out.
No, they meaning?
General Sheehan, General Krulak, Marine Corps colonels, generals, Al Gray, Cook, and especially General Joy.
Joy.
General Jim Joy and General Carl Steiner they're evil men. And they are in this diary meeting with my husband almost every day in Beirut. They trained the men in black who killed those people in Waco.
Not only does she claim that Waco was a deliberate killing, but later in the interview she says that the military knew that the Marine Corps barracks was going to be bombed in Beirut, Lebanon. That bombing occurred in 1983, and more than 200 Marines died. The official story is that the bombing was a result of Arab terrorists. She doesn't explain why the military would allow hundreds of Marines to die, so we are left to wonder if the bombing was intended to give the Marines an excuse to get out of Lebanon, or if it was intended to create anger towards Arabs. As with the September 11th attack, the Oklahoma City bombing, and the killings at Waco, it is difficult to find a sensible motive. But perhaps Kay Griggs is correct that many top government officials are under the control of criminals and lunatics.
I'm Ted L. Gunderson, a 27-year veteran of the FBI who retired in March of 1979. At the time of my retirement, I was the senior special agent in charge of the FBI Los Angeles Division, with more than 700 personnel under my command and a budget of $22.5 million. I was an agent on the street for 9.5 years, and then I advanced administratively. I was a supervisor, and then I was number 2 man in Connecticut and Philadelphia, and assistant special agent in charge was the title. And then I became a chief inspector, and then I was agent in charge in Memphis, Dallas, and the senior special agent in charge in Los Angeles, because I had 3 other special agents in charge under me and 24 supervisors under them. I have information chiseled in stone, documented, that the FBI had advanced knowledge about 911 and did nothing to prevent this from occurring. And this is atrocious. It's unbelievable, having been a former FBI agent myself. And it's very obvious that this whole thing is being orchestrated by the powers that be at the highest level of our government, and I want the world to know about it. The minute I saw the planes fly in to the tower on television, live as a matter of fact, the question I had in my mind was, there is no way, absolutely no way, that somebody could skyjack 4 planes, 20 people, skyjack 4 planes, in this case 19 individuals, and our government would not know about it in advance. We have, the U.S. government, the most advanced intelligence techniques of anybody in the world. And you'll never convince me we didn't have advanced knowledge about what was going on. We saw the airplanes go in, and it's also a question about whether they're remotely controlled. I don't know about that. I hate to comment on something where I have no documentation. But there's much more to this story than has come out so far. You will never in a million years convince me that those buildings, those towers, collapsed because those planes hit them. I'm confident that they were imploded. As a matter of fact, there were seismograph readings from the basement, 2 of them, about the time that the buildings collapsed. There were also molten steel that was in the basement, which is a very high temperature for melting steel, and those planes hit above the 80th floor, so there's no way that airplane fuel could have dropped down that low. Also, there were fires that burned in the basement for some 100 days afterwards. So there's some implication. There's some finagling, there's some maneuvering, as far as I'm concerned, and there are many, many more people involved in this than these so-called skyjackers and terrorists. The anti-terrorism legislation was written back in the middle 1980s under the George Bush Sr. administration. a female Department of Justice attorney, who was one of the authors, made the statement publicly: before this passes Congress, people have to be killed. Now, if we fast forward to a World Trade Center car bombing in February 1993. At that time, the FBI had a 43-year-old former Egyptian army officer as an informant who was in with the terrorists. He was commissioned by the terrorists to put the bomb together. He went to his FBI superiors: we're going to use a dummy bomb, right? And they said, no, we're going to use a real bomb. So the FBI not only knew in advance that they were going to bomb the World Trade Center, they furnished the ingredients for the bomb, which is absolutely unbelievable that they get away with this. What's unbelievable about it is this was actually printed in the New York Times on October 28, 1993. But they got away with it. And if I was a congressman or senator, I would demand an investigation. Why would the FBI furnish the ingredients for the bomb that brought down or that had damaged the World Trade Center in February 1993? We had 6 people killed there. We had 1,000 people injured. We had a total of 6 citizens who died in the February 1993 World Trade Center car bombing. We had $1,000 worth of 1,000 individuals were injured. We had $500,000 in damage. But there weren't enough people who died to pass the anti-terrorism legislation. So now we fast forward to May the 19th, April the 19th, 1995, Oklahoma City bombing. We had 169 people who died, probably 169 because there was one leg they never did identify. And a year later, the anti-terrorism legislation passed. Now, it wasn't tough enough. I can't prove that there were explosives that were placed in the World Trade Center in the 9/11 situation. However, from what I've seen, an expert on implosions from Albuquerque, New Mexico, who worked for the government under government contract, stated immediately afterwards that the buildings were imploded. And then he retracted his statement and said, well, maybe they were, maybe they weren't. But basically, now he's saying that they weren't imploded. But other experts who have looked at the pictures say that the buildings were imploded. I think that in order to implode those buildings, there had to be implications, government implications or involvement in placing these charges. I mean, that was a tremendous project. I mean, I don't know how many people would be involved in that. Going back to Oklahoma City, an inside investigator told me there were at least 11 other people involved in the Oklahoma City bombing. Now, if you have 11 other people involved in Oklahoma City, you're going to have 3 or 4 times that involved in the World Trade Center situation.
Undeterred by his public perception since The Wogan Show, David has gone on to develop theories surrounding the attacks of September 11th in New York. He suggests that the mainstream media has programmed the population into accepting an official story of 9/11, using repetition to indoctrinate the public into accepting a particular narrative.
From hours after the towers were hit, we had the repetition of Bin Laden did it. Bin Laden did it. It was Arab terrorists that linked to Afghanistan and the Taliban, and there was later resistance to going into Iraq, which was not connected to 9/11 on the surface, but there was virtually no resistance to the invasion of Afghanistan because people had taken on the programming of the official story of 9/11 and therefore had seen reality as, oh, well, yeah, we've got to go in and sort them people out in Afghanistan.
However, I suggested to David that although he attacks the mainstream media for perpetuating fear, he himself adopts similar techniques, constructing a narrative and using repetition of particular buzzwords that stick with the audience.
Problem, reaction, solution. Pyramid power, totalitarian tiptoe, as I call it.
No, what I do, as by the journalists coming at me, after years of it, is I'm trying to communicate something with people. And what you learn through trial and error is ways of saying things that people can get and understand what you're trying to say.
MI6 have very strong control of the national media in the UK. There's no doubt about that. In fact, MI6 has a section called Information Operations, which is called IOPS, purely there to manipulate the media. In the 1970s there was a committee called the D-Notice Committee, which was made up of senior journalists in the UK, and it was there to officially protect national security, but effectively it meant that it was there to block stories about intelligence activity and operations by MI5 and MI6. So it's a bit of a strange concept that we can have the media effectively doing the bidding of the spies in this country to suppress legitimate stories of it. It's interesting that Michael X's file has been closed until 2054 because only the spies have that length of time with which to suppress documents, so I think that's a very clear indication of spy involvement in this case. Government papers are traditionally suppressed for 30 or 50 years maximum. Spies always have a 100-year rule. We would recruit someone perhaps within a criminal gang and then encourage them to go and rob a certain bank isn't beyond the bounds of possibility at all. Quite often they will recruit people, agents, to carry out illegal acts, and they call these people patsies. So these people think they're just doing something, you know, for their gang or whatever, the big boss, whereas in fact they are being run unconsciously as agents by MI5 and encouraged to break the law by MI5. But of course if they then get caught, they know nothing, so MI5 gets away with it.
The good cop, bad cop scenario is just theatre, to deceive the viewer. The reality is that the BBC is a government propaganda machine and is already, and always has been, controlled and used by the government.
The headlines at 9 o'clock. In the past hour there have been 3 major explosions on the London Underground. The first occurred at 8:10 on the Piccadilly line between Knightsbridge and Hyde Park Corner. The second at 8:16 on the Central line between Tottenham Court Road and Oxford Circus. And the third at 8:27 as a train was arriving at Vauxhall Station from Stockwell on the Victoria line. Emergency services have been called to all 3 scenes. There are no reports available yet on the number of casualties, and the police have said that it's too early to identify a possible cause. London Underground is now closed, and the police are asking people not to travel.
350,000 people alone are making their way towards the City of London at this point. And if the access overload system has been triggered and they can't get onto their mobile telephones, this will have profound implications for them, the next of kin.
We can now confirm that a tanker carrying chlorine has exploded at the junction of Shoreditch High Street and Commercial Street. Chlorine is extremely toxic in this form, and the police are issuing express warnings to people to stay indoors, close windows and remain there until the all clear is given.
In the days leading up to 7/7/2005, there were hoax bomb scares in Nottingham and Sheffield. Were these false alarm hoaxes meant not only to cause panic and confusion, but also to lull everyone into a false sense of security and into thinking that the initial reports in London on 7/7/2005 would also be false alarm hoaxes, so people would ignore them until it was too late? Second chapter title: Peter Power, Dupe or Accomplice? Then, on 7/7/2005, we were told on TV by Peter Power of Visor Consultants that they, and the private company employing them, who helped choose the scenario for it, were running a mock terrorist drill in the London Underground, with practically the same scenario as what actually really happened on that day. In other words, the actual mock anti-terror drill that the BBC Panorama programme of May 2004 had outlined had been chosen by Visor's client to be carried out on the very same day that 4 Muslim suicide bombers also chose the same scenarios that Visor's client had chosen for the mock drill, causing real and devastating explosions on 3 London tube trains and 1 road vehicle. Please think about that unbelievable set of coincidences for a few seconds, to let the implications of it sink in. Then, please ask yourself, what are the odds against all of that happening by chance?
Just to get this right, you were actually working today on an exercise that envisioned virtually this scenario.
Almost precisely. I was up until 2 o'clock this morning because it's our job, my own company, Advisor Consultants. We specialise in helping people to get their crisis management response. How do you jump from slow time thinking to quick time doing? And we chose a scenario with their assistance which is based on a terrorist attack because they're very close to a property occupied by Jewish businessmen. They're in the city, and there are more American banks in the city than there are in the whole of New York. A logical thing to do. And I've still got the...
I was going to say, how extraordinary today must feel for you as it unfolds.
In his TV video clip, Peter Power states that their customer helped to choose the exact scenario. I repeat, Visor's customer helped to choose the exact scenario. To this day, Peter Power refuses to publicly identify the customer who chose the exact scenario. Why? Third chapter title, Foreign Security Firms. Can they be trusted? Verint Systems is the security firm that is responsible for the CCTV surveillance cameras in the London Underground rail network, and it is an Israeli company with approximately 1,000 employees. No CCTV footage of the 4 Muslims boarding the tube trains has been released by Verint, who claim that their cameras were not working. Why? Because the 4 Muslims were not on the tube trains that blew up.
Watch as he shrugs his shoulders 3 times in dismay, each shrug more dramatic than the last. As you watch this scene for the final time, ask yourself, is this the kind of conduct you would expect from an agency that routinely sends an advance team to a city a month or more prior to the president's arrival in order to make preparations? Now ask yourself if the assassination could have taken place at all had those men been on the bumper during the motorcade.
Ashley Banfield is on the phone with us again from Lower Manhattan with more on what is still burning there. Ashley?
Brian, I can no longer hear you, but I just want to reiterate for you, if we can zoom in past me, that building right there, the brown building, the tall one, is number 7 World Trade Center. I've heard several reports from several different officers now that that is the building that is going to go down next. In fact, one officer told me they're just waiting for that to come down at this point, that there's no way it's going to be recovered and there's no way that they can stabilize it. The building that is directly south of it is number 6 World Trade Center. It apparently... in fact, you were just told by police that you should move out of your apartment, Fabiana. Yes. You've got Carolina here?
Yes. They advised us to leave because we have...
Oh my God. Look behind us. Please pan in this way. Please be careful of your baby. This is it.
That's the building coming down.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. No. No. Listen.
Okay.
We'll be all right. We'll be all right.
We're okay. Ashley! I think we're okay. Ashley, I think we're okay.
All right. We're going to have to move this way. We're going to have to move. We're going to have to move. That cloud is coming this way.
Yeah. Ashley, get out of there. Leave the camera unmanned if you need to, and get out of there. What we've been fearing all afternoon has apparently happened. We were watching number 7 World Trade, which was part of the ancillary damage of the explosion and collapse of the other 2. We've been talking all day about how fast these plumes of smoke move. You're watching one on the move right now.
I invented this phrase, problem, reaction, solution, for a technique of creating a problem covertly, blaming someone else for it, like 9/11 or Kennedy's assassination. The media then tells the people the version of that problem they want the people to believe, i.e. Lee Harvey Oswald did it, or some Arab fanatics who couldn't fly planes who suddenly managed to fly wide-bodied jets. The public at stage 2, the reaction, are manipulated through fear and outrage to say something must be done. What are they going to do about it? And then those who covertly created the problem and got the reaction do something, then offer these solutions to the problems they have themselves created, which are changes in society which advance the agenda in the Orwellian state. Now,
What happens in terms of creating wars is a mind manipulation technique called problem, reaction, solution. And it works like this. And it works like this. First of all, you create the problem, but you get someone else to be blamed for it. report that problem through the media in the way you want it reported. You get the public to react to your problem by saying something must be done, this can't go on, what are they going to do about it? And at that point, they, who have covertly created the problem and blame someone else, who glean that reaction to do something, then offer the solution to the problems they have created. And it works like this. Problem, reaction, solution. Problem, reaction, solution. Problem, reaction, solution. Problem, reaction, solution. And it works like this.
If you tell the people they have an external enemy, they'll follow you anywhere.
The government may actually have been behind September 11 and the September 11th attacks and the conspiracy theories in general surrounding 9/11.
Problem, reaction, solution. Problem, reaction, solution. Problem, reaction, solution. Problem, reaction, solution.
The New World Order better stop carrying out terror attacks. We've caught them over 200 times in the last 100 years, Western governments doing this. Hitler did it, the Russians did it, the British do it. Look at America, it's turning into a police state.
Problem, reaction, solution. Problem, reaction, solution. Problem, reaction, solution. Problem, reaction, solution. And it works like this. And it works like this.
With regard to 7/7, there's been a witness report in which somebody who was on one of the tube trains says that he didn't see a man with a rucksack. In fact, after the explosion, what he saw was metal pointing upwards from the bottom of the carriage. That would indicate, of course, that the bomb was not carried onto the tube train, but was in fact attached underneath it.
Problem, reaction, solution. Problem, reaction, solution. Problem, reaction, solution. Problem, reaction, solution.
Saddam Hussein has got weapons of mass destruction and he's used...
His weapons of mass destruction program is active, detailed and growing.
There's no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction.
No doubt at all that we will find evidence of weapons of mass destruction.
And it works like this.
Weapons of mass. Weapons of mass. Weapons of mass destruction.
And it works like this. And it works like this. Problem, reaction, solution. Problem, reaction, solution. Problem, reaction, solution. Problem, reaction, solution. And it works like this. Problem, reaction, solution. Problem, reaction, solution. Problem, reaction, solution.
in the world, as so many other people are doing. I don't seek to expose the behaviour of the manipulators to condemn them as people.
Yes, that was in 2005 that we suddenly were approached by people in the 9/11 Truth movement in the UK. It was around the time when my book came out, which is called Spies, Lies and Whistleblowers, which describes Dave's and mine experiences, both of what we saw in MI5 and then also what happened to us when we blew the whistle. And they approached us at an NUJ conference where we were publicising the book. And basically said, well, you know, look, you've blown the whistle on two examples of false flag terrorism, where we have intelligence agencies involved in trying to carry out terrorist attacks and then blaming it on other groups. Have you not actually thought about 9/11? And we hadn't, of course, because when 9/11 happened, we'd been living in London and Dave had been enmeshed in his court case, his fight against the charges under the Official Secrets Act. And then after that, it's just been a fight for survival and going through the appeal courts. And so it was a bit of a nightmare. But at that point, we thought, OK, let's have a look. And we were visited a couple of weeks later and handed some books and some videos, and we sat down and read the book The New Pearl Harbor by Professor David Ray Griffin. And both of us went through it in a day. I mean, we just couldn't put it down. And it really was a case of the scales falling from our eyes at that point. I mean, I remember reading it and thinking, how can anyone say there isn't a need for a proper inquiry, a proper investigation into this? None of the official account really stands up. There is so much evidence out there that contradicts what we've been led to believe. And since then, obviously, I've done more research into it. I became very involved in building up the UK 9/11 Truth movement, and then now I've moved to Europe, sort of working more internationally as well. And I think it's still key. I mean, people in the mainstream media have been dismissive, and now they say, well, it's old news. It happened almost a decade ago. Who cares? But when you think how 9/11 has been misused consistently by our political and governing classes, and they keep saying, well, you know, things change then. And it's been used to take us into this war on terror, the unending war on terror, which is, you know, it's going to go on for a generation at least. It's been used to justify the illegal wars in the Middle East, and it's been used to turn our countries into, you know, police states. So I think 9/11 is very much a sort of core part of anyone who wants to campaign around any of these issues or against any of these wars. Because if we can say, and we can very easily say, that the official account does not add up, then we can say, well, the justification for all these atrocities since is removed. So let's have a rethink. Let's pull out of the Middle East. Let's stop the slide toward totalitarianism that we're seeing in our countries. And let's take our democratic power back. So from one chance meeting when I was trying to publicise the book to now, 5 years later, I still think it's a very key issue for us all. And, you know, it does fit. Obviously, we know that false flag terrorism exists. That's what we had to blow the whistle on. That's why we ended up going on the run around Europe, living in exile, all the way through to 2 court cases. So we know that it happens. And the officials in the intelligence agencies are, of course, desperate to cover all this stuff up. But once you know that, then you look at 9/11, it's just so obvious. There's so much evidence, and there's so many credible people now across the planet who are now questioning it. The issue of 7/7, I think, is trickier. I wouldn't necessarily talk about that in any great detail, but I think once you accept that the premise of false flag terrorism, then you've got to look at every major terrorist atrocity and ask, well, is the official account the real account? And I think 7/7, there are some issues which are slightly dodgy in the sense that Peter Power was running this huge counter-terrorism drill and said on live news feeds that day that, in fact, the drill had been at exactly the same tube stations as the real attacks, so suddenly his exercise went live. So I think that's an interesting point to look at. And also the apparently photoshopped CCTV picture of the 4 terrorist suspects when they were boarded the train at Luton. The timeline doesn't add up. So I think there are questions that need answering, but I don't think there's anywhere near as much evidence as there is with 9/11. But of course we've never had a proper official inquiry into it. All we've had was an anonymous report of the official narrative which came out from some civil service office a few years ago. So rightly, of course, people are questioning 7/7, and the families are demanding that we have a proper inquiry. Well, we do have a problem in this country, of course, that we have the 2005 Inquiries Act, which now means that anyone setting an inquiry within the government can actually set out the terms of that inquiry and then can vet the findings. So, of course, we're never going to get a real inquiry. But I think people just need to keep digging. You know, false flag is something that happens historically, it happens regularly. It's a perfectly standard thing for intelligence agencies to get involved in. I mean, not just in Britain and America, although America is probably the past master of false flag atrocities for its political advantage. But Israel's got involved in certain attacks. So even in Russia there was a very notorious case of false flag terrorism where Alexander Litvinenko, the KGB whistleblower, who strangely fled to the UK for refuge, he blew the whistle on the fact that the modern incarnation of the KGB, which is the FSB, had bombed some apartment buildings in Moscow in 1999 and blamed it on Chechen rebels as a pretext for a full-scale invasion of Chechnya, which of course subsequently went ahead, which led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of innocent people and mass rape and mass atrocity. So, you know, every country does it. Every intelligence agency will use false flag terrorism in order to gain political advantage and to achieve their political goals. Well, that's a very good question. I don't know the answer. I don't think anyone can categorically say one way or the other who is behind false flag attacks, who's really pulling the strings. But I think certainly looking within Britain there is what is commonly called the establishment, which is a meshing of interests of the governing and ruling classes. So this is where you get the sort of cross-pollination between the intelligence agencies, government ministers and MPs, big business, the media people, the arms industry. And these are people who tend to belong to a certain background and who know each other, and they're all reliable chaps. And they will set the agenda undemocratically behind closed doors. So then we get into a position where they decide it's in their interests, or, you know, the country's interests. Unilaterally they decide something and go ahead and carry out an atrocity in order to, you know, build up a market for things like the arms industry, in order to build up an environment politically where they can get away with taking away our basic.
She explains that one of the methods to control government officials is to pressure them into doing unusual sexual activities, which can then be used to blackmail them. She believes that some universities have special fraternities for this purpose. For example, Princeton University has a fraternity called Cap and Gowns, which her husband belonged to. Yale University has a fraternity called Skull and Bones. Supposedly, President Bush and John Kerry were members of that fraternity. To most people, and to some of its members, these fraternities are meaningless organizations, but she believes some of them are used as recruitment centers for government officials.
George got into Cap and Gown, which is the same kind of fraternity. I mean, it's an eating club at Princeton for intelligence officers.
It's Cap and Gown. Would they have anybody involved that wasn't intelligence-oriented?
Football players and so forth. But I have a feeling that Cap and Gown has a lot of intelligence officers and boys who may have been raped. Of course, they'd never talk about it.
Right.
But I know that the initiation is they get very drunk, and even in the Marine Corps they do that. It's called dining in. They have the shellback ceremony. They do a lot of homosexual enticement. The boys are, when they come in, when they're new recruits, they strip them nude, they violate their personal parts. There's a lot of that is going on.
What about
even now?
Tailhook?
Yeah.
Is there a connection?
Yeah, sure, because the cream of the crop is doing this. They're having group sex parties.
And that was a Navy operation too, wasn't it?
Yeah.
She points out that tailhook has a double meaning.
You know what tailhook means, don't you?
No, what is tailhook? Uh-oh. I got a feeling.
Yeah.
Is it a homosexual reference?
Yeah, sure.
Really?
Sure.
Did you know that, Steve? Isn't it something?
Yeah.
And the average person on the street has no idea.
No.
She accuses a Marine Corps general of being a cherry Marine.
What I want to tell you about General Al Gray, my husband was the chief of staff for General Al Gray, who was the commandant of the Marine Corps. And I probably shouldn't say this on the tape, and you all can get rid of it, but he's a homosexual.
Gray.
Gray.
Okay.
He's what they call a cherry Marine.
Then I went to technical services, where I was in charge of finding documents that you don't find in libraries, like where you put explosives on a bridge. Where's the best place to put an explosive on a bridge, and what kind of explosive do you have to get that goes underwater without it, destroying its effectiveness. Also, I had to find, one time they wanted me to find out if there was such a thing as a poison that was undetectable, especially one that seemed to mimic a heart attack, that would kill someone, but it would appear that they had a heart attack. I did find such a thing.
Does this pistol fire the dart?
Yes, it does, Mr. Chairman, and a special one was developed which potentially would be able to enter the target without perception.
The poison was frozen into some sort of dart, and then it was shot at very high speed into the person, so when it reached the person, it would melt inside them, and the only thing would be like one little tiny red dot on their body, which was hard to detect. There wouldn't be a needle left or anything like that in the person.
But also the toxin itself would not appear in the autopsy?
Yes, so that there was no way of perceiving that the target was hit.
I think the first time that I seriously questioned anything that was more than I just couldn't take it anymore was when I came across this document. It was eyes only, and it was to my boss, but he only had one hand and a hook in the other hand, so I always opened all of his mail and his packages and so forth. And this one, he wasn't in the office. I opened it and I read it. It said eyes only. I wanted to read it because I wasn't supposed to, probably. And it was a report about a mission where they had blown up a bridge in Asia somewhere, and they had killed a number of women and children who were on their way to market that morning. It was reported as though they were really proud, mission accomplished. That one bothered me a lot. When my boss came in, I gave him his mail and I mentioned this, and I said, "This is wrong. These women hadn't done anything. These children didn't deserve to die. Why did we do that?" And he said, that's the fortunes of war. And I said, "But we're not at war. We're certainly not at war in that country. Why did we do that? I don't understand it." And he said, "Well, you're very young. When you get older, you'll understand those things."
Would you say a little bit about yourself and how you've contributed to this seminar tonight?
For over 20 years, I was a government spy working for the Defense Intelligence Agency, the Central Intelligence Agency, and the United States military intelligence entities in various capacities throughout the world in varying positions. In the primary years, I worked in the Southeast Asia environment. In the mid-70s, I moved into Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, Romania. In the early 80s, I went into what people know as the black helicopters flying around in military operations in Task Force 160, based out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky, under the control of the National Security Council. From there, I went into Honduras and Nicaragua as a special operations CIA pilot flying for Ollie North in the National Security Council, bringing drugs into seeing the drugs were brought into the United States. We simply brought the drugs out of the Contra camps into designated areas in Honduras. They were then transferred into military and civilian aircraft and brought into the United States, dispersed to our children around the United States.
What I have to say may be highly contested and should be highly contested about those in power, because what I have to say about them is not a compliment.
Did George Bush have knowledge about the drug operation coming out of Central America and South America?
Yes.
Explain.
Well, he was in one of the camps.
Yeah, but did he know about it?
He was standing at a press.
George was also, in addition to Ollie.
George Bush was standing right at a cocaine press.
And did you have a picture of that?
In a place called Roos Roos. I have a picture of something.
Okay, we won't go into that.
I believe I was paid for 22 years to work for the American people. I believe that you have the right, as Americans in this country, as taxpayers, to know what happened. What you do with this information is completely up to you. How you deal with it is completely up to you. Whether you believe me is completely up to you. But I will tell you this, what you do with it will have an effect on you the rest of your life. If you choose to ignore what I have to say, in time to come, you'll see that probably you should not have completely ignored what I have to say. And that's just my own opinion. But it's an opinion of an intelligence officer who's been out there, who's been battling in the field for the right for you to call me a liar. I think this is a wonderful country when it's a country that you have the right to your own opinion. There aren't many countries out there where you can have the right to your own opinion. And I think that we need to continue to protect our rights to have that opinion. I can see that everything we were doing from 1986 in the OSGs until I left in 1992, 1992, were designed to align countries into a one-world government. There's no doubt in my mind that that's what we were doing. Well, in working for the people I work for, I only see two classes. I see the leaders who are the elite, and I say the leaders who are the elite because of the people that we work for. We work for the Rothschilds, the Roosevelts, the superpowers in money around the world. There was never any question of finances on anything that we did. If I needed $250,000 for a mission, I had a signature line of credit. I walked into a bank in New York, I signed my signature, pulled out $250,000 cash, walked away, and that money was replaced the following week. It was that easy for me. So in answer, I hope that I've answered that in saying there's two groups. There's the citizens and there's the elite. And that's all there are. Those around the world that think that there's going to be an upper class or that there's going to be comfort like there was, there won't be. Myself, I see even maybe a third class, but that third class won't be considered citizenry on the New World Order. It'll be considered enemies of the New World Order who are possibly living in state of an underground. I think in summing up what I'd like to say to all of you who listen to this video and in the media, I'd like to ask one question. Is anybody there?
I met 12 different people, just sort of travelling from place to place day after day, who told me the same basic story about seeing people apparently change into a reptilian form and then back again. And then you start meeting more and more and more people, and there comes a point where you've met so many people who told you the same story, not just in the same area or the same walk of life or even in the same country, and from many different backgrounds, that you realise there's something here that needs to be looked at.
Critics of David's work, such as Ivan Fraser, have claimed that some of David's sources lack credibility, suggesting that David may be on the end of a disinformation campaign. Mr. Fraser refused to be interviewed for the documentary, but did outline in an email his role within David's work and his own theories in regards to some of David's sources.
I've written The Biggest Secret, and I sent it to him to spell check it and everything, right? It came back, and I paid him to do it. Not a lot, but I paid him to do it. It came back so appallingly done. I then had to go and pay someone else to do it properly. And the next thing I know is he's writing in magazines and on the internet that he edited my book. Edited my book? Are you kidding? You having a laugh?
Most damaging to David's credibility, however, was syndicated radio host and fellow conspirator Alex Jones's comments about David in a recent documentary, in which Mr. Jones described David as an opportunistic con man.
You know, I like Alex. I've been on his show since many times, and I think he's very embarrassed by that comment now. He should be. But Alex Jones is a guy who is doing a terrific job in America, alerting people to the 5 cents level of the conspiracy. Fantastic job he's doing, and more power to him. You see, when people are getting information out to the people, that people need to hear, I'm going, brilliant, mate. I don't care if he's only doing it with the money. I'm not saying he is. I'm sure he isn't, but I'm not saying he's doing it. But I don't care if he was. If he's getting information out, or anybody's getting information out, then do it for the money, but get the information out. That's the thing, because otherwise we're going to live in an Orwellian state within 5 to 10 years.
Various names are given to different types of conspiracy theories, but the most famous of them all, the one that ties them all together, is the concept of New World Order, a term coined by George Bush Sr. in a speech he gave to the US Congress on September 11th, 1991. Dr. Graham Spencer gave us his take on this phrase.
I think that the New World Order was about the opportunities of capitalism. But of course capitalism depends on some people doing very well and some people not doing very well. So in that sense it seems to me it's extending that inequality globally. It might be more accurate to call it a New World Disorder rather than a New World Order.
I asked David as to why the concept of New World Order has not been discussed within the mainstream media, and as to why other leading political journalists do not conform to David's way of thinking.
Well, it's just about belief and what your mind could accept. And also what research you've done, because the people that say this whole reptilian thing, there's no evidence, they haven't done research into it. There's no evidence means it's too incredible for me to believe. It's not even worth researching it because it's too ridiculous.
She then describes the initiation ceremonies in more detail, and noticed that her husband is one of the sources of this information.
I mean, if this really got out, that these guys are all inducted because they've got some kind of homosexual thing on them.
Indoctrination. I mean, or induction. They have to do that.
Yeah.
They do that.
Yeah. Even
in a coffin. And it's even now coming into the military totally. The chiefs do that. They put them in the coffin. They do the bowling ball trick.
Okay, you're going to explain this. What happens when you get in the coffin? Why do you get in a coffin?
Oh, they get, when you get your eagles, that's a German thing.
Okay.
You know, it's what the German high command did, and most of them, you know, had the boyfriends and stuff, the Krupps and all of that. It is a German thing that they say goes back to Greece, and it's all the male Marine-looking men that they do it with. See? So now the chiefs have to do that. What they do is they get, George said it's like a zoo. They get everybody really drunk, and they sometimes call it dining in. Shellback is another time that they do it. Not everybody does it, but the ones who do it, if they're young, they get right up to the top. It's a...
okay, well, what actually do they do? They've got a coffin, they get inside this...
Anal sex. That. They do... They put them in the coffin and they do things.
Okay, they perform things on each other?
Yeah, while they're all around there going drunk. And
I see. So there's a guy in the coffin.
Yeah, and he's the one who
is the recipient of all the acts.
Right, right.
Yeah. Probably say to conclude these are oral sex acts on this guy or something like that. Okay.
Yeah, oral and anal, whatever.
Yeah.
But
what's the significance of the coffin?
I don't know.
Although she never explained what the bowling ball trick is, you should ask yourself, would a top military official, or any other man, tell his wife that he was pressured into joining these bizarre ceremonies if they were not true? Not every man in the military is enthusiastic about homosexual sex, so there are also orgies with women.
These orgies are going on all over the Mediterranean, that the captains, lieutenants, the men who rise to the top are the ones who are picked to play the games, the pool parties, the nude pool parties. And they have secretaries who come in. I've talked to 3 guys and of course my husband, who went to these parties. But what they do is, and this is General Al Gray, who was the main prime mover, they would go to a place like Aix-les-Rosés, where Charles Caddock, this teacher who inducted, got my husband into it, he retired in one of these all-male party houses on the Mediterranean. I mean, that's where and my husband kept up with him all through the years.
But these sex parties and orgies, they're all homosexual in nature, or is there some heterosexual?
They start off with the wild secretaries. It's kind of, my husband did those in Indonesia. He did them at a place in Northern Virginia with his first wife.
She was told by military leaders and their wives that this is normal.
What percentage do you think of these higher-up people are bisexual?
Oh, all of them. If they're in special operations, if they're Marines, they're all bisexuals. They've all had to do it in order to get to be a bird colonel. The SEALs, it's kind of like the fast road to the top.
So a guy could not be a SEAL without having.
Oh, I don't believe so. I haven't met one that I don't believe would have done it. And judging from what a couple of colonels told me, it's just, that's the norm.
This is for the brothers and sisters at Kent. For the brothers and sisters this year. Second Battalion, 1st Marines, power to the people. 22nd Cavalry's fighting Da Nang, and I hope they realize this is their last goddamn chance.
All that with respect, 4th Army, retired. I'm taking in 9 Purple Hearts, Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star, Bronze Star, Army Commendation, and a lot of other shit. This is for my brothers.
We don't want to fight anymore, but if we have to fight again, it'll be to take these steps.
They were having little zigzag wars. It's all to sell weapons. It's all about weapon sales. It's all about drugs. It's all about funny money.
Most people assume that the U.S. military wanted the Vietnam War, but she claims that the military was pushed into Vietnam by the same group who were behind the bombing of Dresden during World War II. She supports the accusation that the American military was fooled into bombing Dresden simply to slaughter the German civilians. She also supports the accusation in Michael Piper's book, Final Judgment, that some Israelis were the masterminds of the President Kennedy assassination.
You didn't used to kill women and children in war when the British Army, when they were pure kind of, you didn't go out and kill. I think Dresden, they did do some of that, but that was Walt Whitman Rostow and his crowd. And he's a very dangerous man, because Walt Whitman Rostow is a communist.
Okay, and in what capacity is he?
Oh, he was one of the wise men in Kennedy's administration. I think he was probably responsible for the movement that got Kennedy murdered. I believe it was an Israeli group which did it with some of these rogues. Walt Whitman Rostow was the one who got us into the Vietnam War because he wanted to sell the weapons and stuff. He and Victor Krulak, who is the present commandant's father, Krulak was his lackey. Walt Whitman Rostow's lackey. Walt Whitman Rostow went with Taylor, General Taylor, and wrote the report that got us into the Vietnam War. And all the time that the Pentagon was saying no, 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 he was a cheerleader for the weapons sales. He and Henry Kissinger, Heinz. He and Henry. Walt Whitman Rostow, Eugene Debs Rostow, these were communists, named for communists. Eugene Debs Rostow and it's either his son or his other brother runs the big Boston mob, the port there. His name is Nicholas Rostow.
She claims that the war in Bosnia was also manipulated by these people, and that the CIA is not as important as we assume it is. She believes that most of the secret operations are coming from a group of criminals working within our military and NATO. Sometimes she refers to them as the joint.
The war in Bosnia is simply a stage to train assassins, to be a market for brand new weapons, to be a marketplace so that the drug money can be used. And the Army runs the whole show. It's totally run by the Army. The CIA is a bogus thing. You know, it's training and doctrine command. It's NATO. It's SHAPE. Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe, started by Eisenhower. It's a totally independent corporation. Its main function is to sell weapons and launder money.
You're talking about CIA?
No, talking about SHAPE.
SHAPE. Okay.
CIA is kind of bogus. I mean,
that's just
there.
A trade name for the media to use.
It's to confuse us. It's just to get us off the track. It's all being done by Army people who are now joint.
She describes the joint as being in New York, and that it acts as a funding organization for their criminal activities.
The funding organization, one of the funding organizations was out of New York, and it was called the Joint. And Meyer Lansky, see, our mob, the organized crime, the Jewish Kabbalist group.
Unlike the gangsters of Al Capone's era, Meyer Lansky and his friends can manipulate entire nations rather than just a few cities. In this next segment, she mentions that one of the operations that the Joint was funding was the illegal immigration of Nazis into America. Since she describes the Joint as being Jewish, your first thought might be to assume that they were helping Jews escape Nazi Germany. However, what she describes may be what other people refer to as Operation Paperclip, although she does not use that expression. She is going to mention that many of these Nazis had the German disease, and she refers to them as the Pink Triangle Boys. She is referring to homosexuality and sex with children. The Nazi Party had the same problem that the Republican Party suffers from. Specifically, there are a lot of accusations that many top Nazi and Republican leaders are homosexual, that some are raping children on a regular basis, and that some are covering up the slave trade. In Nazi Germany, some of the rapists and homosexuals were arrested and put into prison camps, and pink triangles were put on their uniforms to identify them from the other prisoners. She believes that thousands of these pink triangle boys were brought to America at the end of World War II. She also claims that the Nazi government was brought down by the German people when reports about the raping of children started spreading through the population. This seems to be happening right now with the Bush administration. The Jeff Gannon incident seems to be forcing a lot of people to face the possibility that many top government officials are not what they claim to be.
This funding group in New York, they would pay for passports which were illegal, and in fact, my grandfather was involved with that. That's how I know so much about it, because my grandfather was told to keep silent and not to tell anybody, but of course he told my grandmother, and my grandmother told me, and I've told my children. Everybody knows they brought in probably more than 200,000 Nazi soldiers and SS and, you know, wacko scientists and psychologists, and all of them, most of them, had the German disease, you know, because it was their culture.
The German disease?
Yeah, the German disease is what the Pink Triangle boys were. Colonel Ron Ray writes about this. He's a Marine colonel who's a Christian who's writing about the the cherry Marines, the homosexuality in the group sex orgies and so forth, which brought down the German government because Naples, which is where all of the Navy is doing their playing, I mean, today in Naples, these orgies are going on. It was where Krupp, the weapons manufacturer, used to take the German high command, and they would go into the Isle, on the Isle of Capri, into the Blue Grotto. And they would have big orchestras, and they'd bring in little boys, little Italian boys, who would be raped. They'd give them trinkets. And, of course, the mothers gradually found out, and just like me, it was one thing when there was just one of me. Now there are a lot more of us wives who are talking and telling truth. And it took those Italian women went to newspapers in Italy. They wouldn't listen. But when they went to the wives of these guys in Germany, it brought it all out. It brought the German government down because they were duplicitous in it, you know. But what they were doing was pedophilia. They were raping, bringing in little boys. They involved the Catholic priests, you know, who were bringing in all, anyway.
I am the son of an oil man. I lived overseas all of my life. I was very fortunate in both having several graduate degrees and being a Marine Corps infantry officer, Marine Corps intelligence officer, and then a clandestine intelligence case officer. I've programmed imagery satellites. I've helped steal signals code books. I've done counterintelligence. I'm basically intimately familiar with the way in which the U.S. government does or does not do the craft of intelligence.
What you need to know is I'm a spy saying spying doesn't work. It's costing you $1.2 billion a week to produce the president's daily brief for a guy that can't read. People don't realize this. Apart from the fact that NSA is 1950s mindsets with 1970s technologies, SAIC completely screwed up Trailblazer, Echelon is baloney. 80% of your signals intelligence comes from analysis of patterns. So you don't need to violate privacy. All you need to know is that Schmuckhead is calling Afghanistan once a week. General Shinseki knew exactly what was needed to make Iraq go right, and Paul Wolfowitz lied to Congress and said they'll receive us like liberators and stuff. If I had been General Shinseki, I would have grabbed Wolfowitz by the neck and thrown him down the steps of Capitol Hill. You don't let people lie like that. It's unprofessional to confuse loyalty with integrity, and we have had a failure of generalship in America. Our generals have been too eager to keep their stars and not eager enough to think for themselves and uphold the Constitution. Smedley Butler, the highest decorated Marine, said, war is a racket. War is a racket. War is a racket, and the only reason it's happening is because the American public is lethargic. Blog that. You are the Paul Reveres and Patrick Henrys of our generation. Bottom-up horizontal connection is key. Sharing at all levels, not top-down control. Public intelligence and influence is about to take off. We are about to bury rule by secrecy. Civil affairs is the focal point. The intelligence guys need to go back in their box. Bloggers, not informants, are key. The FBI is about to try and hire 2,000 informants in a Soviet police-style approach to security. That's idiocy. If you bloggers self-organize and attach yourself like leeches to specific issues, corporations, organizations, challenges, whatever, you will be the intelligence Minutemen of this century. The power is in your hands. There aren't enough guns to kill us all, and Halliburton can't build the jails fast enough to keep us down. Bloggers, as Linux is organized, where you grab onto an issue or something, and you are part of a structured citizen journalism blogging thing that lets no evil doing go unnoticed, that rules. So I think we're at a turning point. I think we're at the very beginning of a historic tidal shift in power, restoring the Constitution. I don't know how many of you are following this, but the Comptroller General has told Congress the United States of America is insolvent. We're out of Schlitz. We literally have no money to make it to the next decade. Now, there's some very easy solutions. I could eliminate all income taxes tomorrow and have more than enough money to fund the government by using some other guy's bright idea. We tax the Federal Reserve at 0.0006, doubles our money until we decide to put them out of business permanently, because we certainly should not have central banks. We've put together an electoral reform pledge, and it's my view that any member of Congress, any member of the Senate that refuses to sign both the constitutional pledge supporting the Constitution and the electoral reform pledge should be put out of business. And I believe that will be 95% of all of these people. It may be time to literally dump Congress on its ass and start over. The government has gotten stupid to the point that it can't write a statement of work. And so they ask the contractors to write a statement of work, and the contractors write a statement of work saying, you need more of what I haven't been able to sell. And the government says, oh yeah, right, good. Put it in the budget. This is real shit. I can crack all 10 of the top-level threats to humanity in less than 25 years for less than 1/3 of what the world is spending on the military. Blog that. And I will tell you the price of buying back the United States government, it's $500 million a year. In the early 90s, Newt Gingrich and the Republicans got together. Their plan is now on the street. It's been exposed by a Columbia professor. They concluded that they could buy the United States government from school board to State House to White House for $300 million a year, and by golly, they did. And every single member of Congress is impeachable for having abdicated their Article I responsibilities under the Constitution and serving as foot soldiers for the president and his mendacious vice president. If you confiscate all the wealth in the world, which I do not advocate, all you have is a $5 bill for every one of the 5 billion poor on the planet. For what we have spent on the Iraq War, I could have given a free cell phone to every one of the 5 billion poor on the planet. I could have taken the 10% residual capabilities on DoD satellites, abandoned communication satellites, and I could have provided free T1 to the Southern Hemisphere. Blog that. That's the kind of stuff we have to do. Because if we don't do that, those 5 billion people, instead of producing wealth that stabilizes the earth, are going to produce plagues, epidemics, criminal gangs, drugged up people. Ralph Peters, a friend of mine, and the bottom line here is the only path to wine, women, and wealth for badasses anywhere on the planet that have no money is guns. And what's happening here is we're at the very beginning. We're just starting to come out of our little eggshell. When the industrial era began, it broke the connection between kinship and trust. And it started treating people as commodities. And then we lost sight of our government and we allowed the corporations to buy the government. The United States of America no longer represents we the people. But you can change that. The reason it's not working today is because we have a military-industrial complex that profits from secrecy and war, and it does not profit from efficiency and peace. Blog that. The bottom line here is that central banking is an evil cancer. These people are selling us credit they don't have so they can take profits they don't deserve out of our pockets. That's nuts. The United States government is constitutionally chartered to print money on the good faith and credit of all of us and not pay interest. Why are we being such fools? Well, unfortunately, if you fight them, you get assassinated. Lincoln and Kennedy were both about to print money and not borrow from the banks. I can't connect those two dots, but I can tell you they're side by side. But the reality is the federal government is broken in every possible way. And it's going to be localized, bottom-up resilience networks. They're going to save us. That's where you guys come in. Our educational system stinks. It beats the creativity out of kids by the time they're in the 4th grade. It forces you to become a blogger or hacker in order to become creative. So you guys are the lifeboat. We've gone from America the Beautiful to America the Shit. Now, I believe we need to start blogging retrospective impeachments. I'm not saying we need to hang them or tar them or feather them, just out them. I think it's time for citizen investigative journalism to go deep and go back and go current. And people need to understand they can't get away with this stuff. There is absolutely no lack of solution, and there is also no lack of money. What is lacking is the popular political will to exercise our God-given right to be in charge. I got thrown off Fox News for saying the global war on terror wasn't real. Well, it's not. Okay? I mean, until we can get to one man, one bullet for the top 6,000, we can contain the next level, and we can provide a quality of life for everybody on the planet at the lowest level, we're not going to get it. The Air Force solution for terrorism is to kill one guy in an entire village. which of course creates 100 to 200 additional terrorists because of that indiscriminate war crime. It's just nuts. And it's nuts because the media isn't doing their job, and so it falls to you. And my dream is to have someone adopt every zip code and start doing that weekly report for their zip code. And then those little reports will start having babies, and it'll start spreading. Your government is stupid, and they're stupid deliberately. The intelligence community does not do open source information because they like to think that the cabinet departments are doing their open source information. That's not true. The cabinet departments don't know how to do decision support. What they know how to do is take stakeholder interests and turn them into policy that increases budget share. That is not what I call reality-based budgeting. Politics today has gotten so dirty it's not worth anybody's time if they've got a brain. Well, I don't have a brain, I have a soul. And I believe that America needs to get back in the business of managing itself. I am absolutely certain that central banks are an evil. Central banks are screwing us all, or we'll head it right. We are pigs being harvested for profits. I do believe there are secret societies, although, you know, given a choice between conspiracy and incompetence, I generally go with incompetence. The Bilderberg Group, I just saw a list of who attended the last time, and it's almost a list of nobodies who want to be somebodies combined with somebodies on their way down. You know, I'm not that impressed. These people think they're the movers and the shakers. They're only the movers and the shakers as long as you let them be the movers and the shakers. I spent 18 years trying to help secret government agencies get in touch with unclassified information. And Tom Atlee sent me an email, and he had this little signature blog where Buckminster Fuller said, don't try and heal a broken system, create a new system that replaces it. So I'm honored to be here to set the tone for you guys. And my bottom line is don't waste your time on the federal government. It's going away. There are 27 secessionist movements. There are 9 distinct nations in North America. I anticipate some virtual separation in the Republic. And I think that you're going to find that, like Vermont, for example, is all of a sudden going to be seen by the rest of America as exactly where we want to be, or Seattle. And so that's called the spike theory of change. As soon as one state gets it perfect, it's going to spread like wildfire.
Now, you heard Homeland Security, counterterrorism. Osama bin Laden is dead. Now the U.S. has announced plans to begin pulling some of its troops from Afghanistan. And now President Obama has revealed a new national strategy for counterterrorism. But what does this really mean, and who even are the terrorists? Joining me now to talk more about that is Susan Lindauer. She is a former CIA asset. She covered Libya at the United Nations during the negotiations for the Lockerbie trial, so she really has a lot of insight into Libya. Thank you so much for being with us. Now, first of all, with this new counterterrorism strategy, I'm just curious if you have any reactions to it. What changes? I mean, Afghanistan and Pakistan are still the target, you know, the target's still Al-Qaeda. It's all the same stuff. So do you think resources will be just redeployed from Afghanistan into other areas?
I think that it is, I'm very disappointed in President Obama for thinking that the platitudes are going to address the terrorism issue. What I see us doing is creating more terrorism through our policies in Libya and Yemen. I think that our actions speak louder than words. That adage holds true on anti-terrorism. We are firing up Islamic fundamentalists, and we are not, our actions are not proactive. They are not problem solving. We're actually making the situation much worse.
Do you think that that's going to continue? Because as we hear Obama give plans for some troops to pull out of Afghanistan, we hear lawmakers call for resources to other areas, such as Yemen and Pakistan and other countries. So do you think that we just see this war take on a different face in a different country?
Yes, and I'm especially disturbed about Libya. Mm-hmm. The United States is pulling troops out of Afghanistan so that we can go into Libya. And what my documentation is showing, as an asset, as a former asset, I have extremely good ties and knowledge and depth of resources inside Libya today. What I'm finding is a video documentation that NATO rebels are actually the same al-Qaeda fighters that we've been dealing with in Iraq and Afghanistan, who've now come home to Libya.
And that's what I want to hear about. Because we just heard Obama today say that Gaddafi essentially is a terrorist, and the U.S. is abiding by the UN mandate to fight that. So what do you see as the reality, and what evidence do you have that it is al-Qaeda that is, you know, amongst these rebels?
Well, first of all, I was directly involved in the 1990s operation to get terrorists out of Libya. And I can assure you that all terrorists were removed from Libya by about 1998, 1999. Since then, Gaddafi, by the way, was the first government to inform Interpol about Osama bin Laden. Gaddafi is hated by Islamist fundamentalists because he is a socialist Muslim, and he has a very different agenda that is not Sharia. Gaddafi has a very strong record on women's rights. Women have the right to education, hold property, divorce, hold jobs, have income, many rights that other women in the Arab world do not have. So he is a moderate, and he is not involved in any terrorism at all. That is absolutely foolishness.
So then do you see the United States' role in backing the rebels actually making the fight in the war on terrorism against al-Qaeda worse?
We have shifted. I'm amazed. I'm so disappointed in Obama that he is actually shifting resources to finance al-Qaeda rebels and to finance, to provide U.S. enforcement of the al-Qaeda presence in Libya. Now, I just want to tell you, I want to tell your viewers, we have video documentation that is coming from refugees fleeing the rebel strongholds, and they're bringing out video from their camera phones that they're recording just on the spot. Videos of beheadings, videos of castration,
Right.
where they are gouging out the eyes of men who oppose the Libyan rebels. Women are being raped and subjected to having their breasts cut off.
I mean, it all sounds horrific. I wish we had more time to talk about it, but maybe we can put up on our website where they can go to see those images. I want to thank you for giving us your insight. That was Susan Lindauer, former CIA asset.
Patrick and Chris clearly think they've cracked it. But will the world's most influential conspiracy theorists agree? To find out, Chris agreed to travel to the Isle of Wight to visit David Icke and give him the results.
Hi Chris, nice to meet you. Hi David, nice to meet you. I've been looking forward to meeting you. One of the things that I wanted to get your opinion on was some research that we've carried out recently, and what we expected to find and what we did find from a large-scale survey that we carried out was that the kind of people who tend to believe in conspiracies show a particular profile, or they tend to. And what that suggested to us was that maybe the tendency to believe in conspiracies is there because for some people it serves a kind of psychological purpose. It helps them to try and make sense of what in many ways can seem to be a kind of uncontrollable, unpredictable world. Do you feel that believing in conspiracies does serve some kind of psychological function for those people who tend to believe in them?
Well, you keep using the word theory, and the one word that's not been used yet is evidence. This whole opening of the mind to this conspiracy version of world events has not been as a result of psychological profiles or whatever. It's been the result of people saying they're lying to us.
I'm not trying to convince people they're wrong. I'm saying, well, show me the evidence, convince me.
That's right, yes.
Now, when it comes to some of the claims that you've made, I would say that, you know, for some of them there is next to no evidence. I would also say, I mean, again, we all have human biases. We all tend to be selective. I knew you'd ask me that, and I'll acknowledge openly I haven't actually read the books.
So you don't know the evidence, Chris.
I do know the evidence, because I've read about your writings.
When you've read even one of my books, Then we could chat again, maybe. Because I can't take you seriously about there's no evidence when you haven't read my books. I can't. What can I?
Right, have you read all the evidence relating to the 9/11 conspiracy?
I've read enormous amounts about the 9/11 conspiracy.
And
I've been to America,
at the end of the day,
I've done my own research.
At the end of the day, you are convinced that there is a conspiracy behind 9/11. It was not, as we are told, a terrorist act.
No, it was a terrorist act. Absolutely was a terrorist act.
It was a manipulated.
How else can you describe it?
All right, but it was something that was manipulated by these higher powers that you claim exist. But on all of these issues, there are other points of view. I mean, for the evidence...
Don't believe what I say, then.
I don't believe what you say, obviously.
What's the problem?
Yeah, the problem is, I'm being open-minded. I can tell you what would convince me that you're right. You know, is there anything that could happen in the world that would convince you were wrong? Not just claim that George Bush or Queen or whoever is...
The man's talking crap, mate. You're trying to get me to conform to your view of what I should be to talk about conspiracy theories.
I'm saying be open to the evidence.
No, that's what you're doing. And you might be kidding yourself you're doing it, but you are.
OK, conspiracies take place. It's the nature of the conspiracies, and when there is kind of overwhelming evidence against a particular conspiracy, but people still cling tenaciously to it. That then moves into the realm, as far as I'm concerned, of probably trying to look at the psychology behind it.
I don't care if you've got a problem. It's your right to decide what you want to believe.
Right, and that's what I'm doing.
But it's all this profiling people and saying, well, yes, he's one of them, so he's just believing it because it's giving him a way of seeing the world. It's all that stuff that gets up my nose because it's so song sheet science, song sheet psychology.
I think there is a problem with the belief system. It's non-falsifiable. Nothing could happen that would falsify it.
I've said it in my own books. I'm not saying that every detail in this book is true. It's as near as I can get it. What I'm saying are the themes are true, in my view. That's what I actually say. OK?
No, yeah, OK.
And are we finished?
I don't even like David Icke anyway.
Go and watch the Gogglebox then.
I'm going to watch Bruce Forsyth and Strictly Dancing. What's on the telly tonight, love?
It's Doctor Who, then the X Factor.
Are the soaps on tonight? You know I love all the soaps, Carol.
Watch out for the zombies. 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 They are everywhere. Is this dress too short? Can you see my knickers? Yes, they're black. Zombies.
I love the dress she's got on. Don't think she'll win, though. I love the dress she's got on. Don't think she'll win, though.
They are everywhere.
You can watch the football in the other room. You know it's Coronation Street tonight. I don't care if Silver in the semi-finals. Ken's got a date with Alice. Did you see the news? The government wants to spy on us. Keep us safe from all those criminals and terrorists. I think it's a good idea. It's awful what the government in Syria are doing to the people.
Watch out for the zombies. 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 Is there anything you want from Tesco's? Zombies. Zombies.
Rangers beat Aberdeen and I'm so happy.
I got the promotion in work and now I'm going shopping, yay. Stephen brought me 3 minutes make my day. Zombies. 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 Zombies.
That David Icke talks rubbish. And don't call me a sheeple again. I would not have that music on if I made this video.
Oh, shut up, Mum.